In this video, I'm going to be philosophizing on soundness. I'm going to be discussing various components of soundness. And when it comes to understanding the soundness of truth statements, it's important to understand that we have to make sure our subpropositions of all the meaningful utterances compositioned within our thoughts are going to be the most meaningful. And this is because subpropositions constitute propositions that we can evaluate the criteria of whether or not it's true or not, meaningful or meaningless and arbitrary, and which is valid or not, such as invalid. And as a must, it's important to understand the good enough and necessarily necessary conditions for what constitutes valid, psychologically true, and meaningful criteria for truth statements. And that requires us to have true propositions, and not just psychologically true propositions, but psychologically true, valid, and meaningful subpropositions that are where we really access the well-defined component parts and processes of our truth statements. And soundness is that whole encompassing process in which we have truly, actually, rather than merely perceived, actual, factually valid, psychologically true, and meaningful subpropositions, the composition propositions within the meaningful utterances of thought that are sound. And if it sounds like it makes sense, this is a pretty good start to being able to meaning interpretation what is sound. Though that's not always what's exactly good enough, and what tends to be, as a must, good enough and necessarily necessary conditions to be able to access to knowledge that allows us to start to check off those criteria of what constitutes ultimately what's psychological true about our true statements, and which we could render an inference into the psychological truths of a specific statement, but also not just a statement, the sentences that we use to composition various arguments. And all you really need, and exclusively only two subpropositions to constitute any valid, psychologically true, and meaningful proposition. And we tend to, in truth statements, have an infinite range of potential combinations of just two subpropositions that can constitute an infinite range of propositions within a true statement, in which we can formulate multiple configurations of what's ultimately bound to the boundness situated to our existence regarding psychological truth. That's all I want to say for this video. I hope you have an awesome one. Bye.